This is really an honor to be a speaker at this event. So as Paige said, I work for NRCS as a range specialist, but we're also ranchers in our family. Little bit about myself. I grew up around Santa Rosa, New Mexico, Fort Sumner, New Mexico, that southeast part of the state. Grew up on ranches all our lives. We've been ranchers as far back as I can trace. I was just telling Paige earlier that our last name Armendariz translates to herdsman or cowboy. I looked it up a few years ago and I learned that that's what it means. It's Spanish Basque for herdsman and cowboy, which was really a surprise to me. And as soon as I learned that, I thought, well, that explains a lot about our behavior and why we do what we do. And so as far back as we can trace, we've been ranchers in old Mexico. My family came here to New Mexico in 1989. My dad was a ranch hand and worked for ranchers in the area for a long time, taking care of other people's ranches, other people's cattle. But like every cowboy, he had a dream of a ranch of his own. And he's been really a mover and a shaker and really a hustler. And we're blessed to have him as a leader in our family. We were lucky to grow up this way because when you grow up ranching or you grow up on a ranch, it's really the only job that I could think of where you can take your kids to work every day and it's encouraged. And as soon as we were old enough, my dad took us to work with him every day. And most of what we've learned it on the ground and on the land. And we've developed a passion and a love for the land that really is hard to explain. And so we went to school. When I say we, I refer to myself and my brother because we both grew up this way. My parents sent us off to school. We got degrees in animal and range science, and my brother's a veterinarian now. But really, most of the learning we've done has been on the ground. Learning from the land, learning from people just like my dad. And so, like I say, along the way, my dad decided somewhere that he wasn't going to just work for other people all his life, and he wasn't just going to take care of other people's land and other people's cows. And he decided he was going to build a ranch of his own. And so in 2002, he found a little small grazing lease outside of Santa Rosa, and it had the capacity to run 12 cows. And that's how we got started ranching for ourselves. And along the way, we started picking up grazing leases here and there from other ranchers who were, you got to understand that the average age of a rancher in the U.S. is 60 years old. The rest of the world's thinking about retiring by that age. Ranchers, that's not really an option. And so ranchers just work until they can't work anymore. And there's a lot of ranchers that were getting older and couldn't take care of the ranch, but they didn't want to sell the place. So that's where we've had a chance to come in and pick up grazing leases all over the place. And fast forward 23 years, we've been able to increase the size of the herd to 300 mother cows. And now my dad's working for himself. My mom, they work for themselves. And it's been really a really great journey. And so, like I say, the ranch consists of about 1,800 deeded acres. In 2020, my dad had finally achieved the goal of owning his own place. And so he bought a small place near Cuervo, New Mexico, about 1,800 deeded acres. And the rest of it is grazing leases scattered across 3 counties for another more or less 13,000 acres. The joke in our family, we call it scattered land and cattle because the ranch is scattered across 3 counties. We have grazing leases everywhere from Portales, New Mexico, to Fort Sumner, to Santa Rosa, Puerto de Luna, New Mexico, Pastura, New Mexico, Tolar, all over that general area. Wherever we could find a lease, we pick it up and we do what we can. We also ranch in Old Mexico. Our roots are from Old Mexico, and so we were able to buy the ranch my dad grew up on in Mexico and also we were able to buy the ranch that my mom grew up on, and we've also bought a whole other ranch in the state of Coahuila. And so we ranch out there also. Uh, Both these ranches are run very differently, mostly for logistical reasons. The one in New Mexico gets a lot of attention because all of us are there, and the one in Old Mexico, we probably see this place 2 or 3 times a year when we work cows. And this place is it's 100 miles of dirt road to get to the place. The joke in the family, every time we go out there, we call it the Baja 100 because we drive 100 miles of dirt road just to get to it, and we break leaf springs and get flat tires, and we insist on coming back. And so on both places, we really try to do the best we can do with our management. On this picture, this is in Old Mexico. It's very productive land, even though it's in the Chihuahua Desert. You can see this picture in the middle, pretty tall grass. When it rains, it's really productive land. On the bottom left corner, that's where I introduced my dad and my wife to prescribed burning. We did a prescribed burn there. I believe it was 2011, and that's where my dad started to get a taste for the use of prescribed fire to manage the land. In 2020, we started a ranch to table meat company where we sell beef, lamb, and pork directly to consumers. This little meat company was born out of necessity in the COVID days, when the meat packing plants were at half capacity because employees were sent home, and the price of beef was expensive at the store, yet at the sale barn it wasn't. So we started selling this beef ranch to table. And out of every crisis is born some of the most innovative solutions. And so this was one of them that came out of the COVID days. With all the meat shortages during the COVID days, this thing really took off for us. So we were really blessed to make it all work. Really the right time and the right place. And this is my little family here who helps me make it all work. And so aside from ranching, I've been a range specialist for 16 years. I've worked for the BLM and the NRCS. I've jumped back and forth between both agencies. This is the fourth time I work for NRCS, and I've worked for the BLM another 4 times. Both of them are really good agencies. They all have their pros and cons, and it's been really great to be able to learn land management and be able to bring it back to our ranch and put it into practice. And so along the way, I've learned everything from using prescribed fire to manage woody species encroachment, to grazing management, to restoring lands after a wildfire. This picture on the bottom right is on the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. We were tasked with aerial seeding that land, and that was within 7 days of putting seed on the ground. We had that much cover on the ground. I'll talk about that a little bit. This is really the job right here. It's the fun part of the job is really helping people turn their lands from an unproductive, degraded state like this picture on the left to really productive rangelands like the one on the right. This is really another picture that I'm really proud of because this is on our own ranch over in Puerto de Luna, New Mexico. The picture on the right-hand side is another one of these pictures from the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. NRCS was tasked with fixing the problems on the land. And so on the private lands, I was tasked with putting together a seed mix to put cover back on the land and reduce some of the erosion, the flooding that was going on. I'm sure you saw it on TV. All these little towns around Las Vegas, Mora were flooding. And so we put together a seed mix, we put it on the land, and we got these results on the bottom within 8 months. And learning about soil health, being an advocate for soil health, and working on forest fires and growing up on the ranch, it's been really helpful to be able to bring practical solutions to the land. In this case, they told us that we needed to put native grasses back on the land, and all the experts told us, oh, you need native grasses on here. And I knew that the land didn't need native grasses. There was plenty of seed in these soils, and all the land needed was cover on the land and a living root. And after that, Mother Nature would take care of the rest of it. And it worked really well for us on there. And so these are some of the neater projects that I've been able to work on. And so we'll talk a little bit about soil health here, soil health on rangelands. When I started in 2020 with NRCS as the state lead for range management, my state con came over to me and he told me, I need you to make soil health a New Mexico thing. And I thought to myself, I knew about soil health, I believed in it, but in those days it was really a cropland thing. It was something that farmers did. It didn't really apply to rangelands. Nobody was really talking about soil health on rangelands and how it applied to rangelands. And I thought to myself, well, how am I going to do this if most of New Mexico is rangelands and this soil health thing is a cropland thing? And I thought about it, and then one day it dawned on me that the soil health principles apply to rangelands the same as they do on croplands. And it dawned on me that what farmers are doing on croplands is imitating what the rangelands used to do before we put a plow into the ground and tilled them up. And we'll go over these soil health principles real quick as I can. We're short on time, but we'll go over the 5 soil health principles. What I like about the soil health movement is that it's so simple. I'm a pretty simple guy. I love simplicity, and most farmers and ranchers are simple people too. We like practical, simple solutions. And for years, working for these federal agencies, we would assess the health of the land using 17 indicators of range health. And I never really liked that method. I still don't really like it that much. What I don't like about it is that, in my opinion, it's overly technical. And I would tell myself, I would try to do these assessments with the rancher and I would lose them within the first 15 minutes. And I would tell myself, if the person that spends the most time on the land, which is the rancher, can't stay engaged and go through this entire assessment and get any value out of it, then it's broken. And I would tell myself for years, man, we've got to get something simpler. And that assessment to me is really by the scholar for the scholar and by the researcher for the researcher. And I would tell myself for years, we need an assessment by the practitioner for the practitioner. And that's what I've found soil health principles to be on rangelands. So having said that, I'll go over these real quick. Okay. The beauty about these soil health principles is that you can apply them on rangelands, croplands. If you're a backyard gardener, you can apply them to your backyard garden. And as soon as you apply these principles, you start to see results and you start to see the health of the land improve. The first one here is maximizing a continuous living root. The second one is maximizing diversity on the land. The third one is maximizing soil cover. And the fourth one is minimizing disturbance. And there's a fifth one that some people talk about, others don't. It's integrating livestock. I like to talk about it because to me, this fifth principle really speeds up the healing process. You also got to be careful with that fifth principle because in a lot of ways, it's how we got in this mess of unhealthy rangelands in New Mexico and really most of the Western states. So let's go over this first principle, maximizing a continuous living root. Why is it important? For years and years as ranchers, we've been concerned about the stuff that grows above the ground. We've always known we need grass, we need healthy grass, we need lots of grass to grow livestock, but we never really took the time to think about everything that happens below ground. And that's all these soil microbes and all this life that happens within the soils. And what all these microbes do these microbes is what gives fertility to the land. Before we had fertilizers and things like that, it was soil microbes and living roots and all the life within the soils that made the soils healthy. And so these living roots, they help cycle nutrients, they help cycle water, nitrogen, they break up compaction. Nothing on earth breaks up compaction better than a living root in the soil. Farmers have invented every implement to break up compaction, from discs to tills to rippers. And we keep finding out that there's nothing better than a living root in the soil to break up compaction. If you're ever out on the land and someday you'll come across a rock split in half by the root of a tree. That's how powerful living roots are at breaking up compaction in the soil. It builds soil structure and reduces wind and water erosion. The next principle, maximizing diversity. This is a really big one. These are some of the more common grasses that you should see on New Mexico rangelands. The bottom ones are warm season grasses. We've got blue grama on the bottom right. Let me get my pointer out. Hey, this is blue grama. This is the state grass in New Mexico. Everybody should know blue grama. Okay. This is side oats grama. This is scarlet globe mallow, and this is galleta or possibly tobosa. Hard to tell in the picture, but very important grasses. These are warm season grasses. On the top right is needle and thread, or maybe it's New Mexico feather grass. Hard to tell in that picture. This one is Indian rice grass. The next one over is Western wheatgrass, and then we've got Indian paintbrush on the top left. Okay, these ones are cool season grasses. Very important. Most New Mexico rangelands should have cool season grasses and no longer have them anymore. The cool season component is gone on a lot of New Mexico ranches and a lot of rangelands. Our goal on our ranch is to bring cool season grasses back. When you bring the cool season grasses back to your land, you solve about 10 other problems that you never even intended to solve. And so the reason I really emphasize these cool season grasses is because they're the first thing to green up in the spring and the last thing to go dormant in the fall. And so ranchers in New Mexico, the hardest thing we do in the beef production world is get one calf per cow per year. Very hard thing to do. And I'll go over that real quick and how these diversity applies to that. So when these grasses are still on the land, they wake up in the springtime around mid-March, early March in southern New Mexico. And that's also the same time that most New Mexico beef producers are calving. And wildlife is calving, deer, elk, everything calves in the spring, right? And so the cattle, this is the time of year when they have the most, the nutrient requirements are the highest. And so when they calve on green grass as early as March, it's really a great thing. To put it in perspective, there's 365 days in a year, and the gestation of a beef cow is about 285 days. Okay, so that's how long it takes from the moment of conception till that cow calves. So if you subtract 285 days from the 365 days in a year, it leaves you 80 days. 80 days to breed that cow back so that you can get a calf from her next year around the same time, which is really hard to do. And so if that cow calves in a decent body condition of a 5, then what we call the postpartum anestrus period might be reduced to maybe 30 days. So for those 30 days, she won't even think about breeding. You can turn out bulls all you want. She won't even let that bull near her, okay? Because she's healing her uterus. She just had a 90-pound calf. And meanwhile, we as ranchers, we want her to breed back. And so if you subtract the 30 days from the 80 days you had, that leaves you 50 days to get that cow bred back, okay? And so the estrus cycle of a beef cow is 21 days. So if you divide 50 by 21, that gives you 2 chances. 2 chances for that bull to find that cow in heat, breed her, conceive, and for her to give you a calf next year. Okay. Meanwhile, she's nursing a brand new calf and she's trying to heal her uterus, and she's grazing dormant grasses on New Mexico rangelands. Okay. And so, like I say, most New Mexico rangelands don't have these grasses anymore. They're dormant grasses like these ones down here. Okay. So I really emphasize this diversity in cool season grasses because as soon as you bring diversity back on your land, getting one calf per cow per year becomes a lot easier for a New Mexico rancher. Having a diversity of grasses is like having a buffet for your cows to eat. Okay, cattle and wildlife are not that different. They'll balance their own diet if they've got options. If they don't have options, then they're stuck with whatever is out on the land. and you've got to bring cake, you've got to bring supplements and things like that. And all of those are inputs that cut into your bottom line. Okay. So this diversity is important because when you maximize diversity above ground, you're also maximizing diversity below ground, which is feeding even more of these microorganisms that bring fertility back to the land. It's a big giant food web. And so you want a mix of as many warm season grasses, cool season grasses, annual forbs, perennial forbs, etc. Okay. The more diversity you have, the more living roots you've got in your soil, and you've got greener forage for a longer period of time. And so when you lose that cool season species, then it just takes that much longer to get green grass on the land on New Mexico rangelands. Okay. I won't beat that dead horse anymore. The next one, maximizing soil cover. This one is huge. If you drive around New Mexico, you'll see this from time to time, what we call a fence line contrast. On one side of the fence, you've got a rancher doing a really good job with their management, and on the other side, not so much. Okay. Soil cover is huge. The reason it's important is because it protects the soil from wind and water erosion. It moderates fluctuations in soil temperature, which reduces evaporation when you do get the rain. Okay. So we've all seen in the Chihuahuan Desert where we get an inch of rain and the very next day it's 100 degrees and most of that water evaporated. Very little of that water got into the soils, and it looks like it didn't even rain the very next day. Okay, that's all for lack of cover and living roots in the soil. The other thing, it moderates soil temperature. Okay, when you're a microorganism living on bare ground, it's really hard to do. When you're a microorganism living in covered land, like this picture on the left, a lot easier. I got a brother who was a medic in the Army, and he went to Iraq 2 separate times. And he would tell me that in Iraq, it would get up to 130 degrees in the daytime. And at night, it would get down to 60 degrees at night. And he told me that he had never been so cold in his life than in Iraq in that barren desert. Even though the guy's been all the way to the Patagonia, all the way to Russia, and has been all over the world in some of the coldest places on earth, he explained to me that that's where he experienced the most cold that he's ever felt in his life, in that barren desert. Okay. And what's really going on is the fluctuation in temperature in a 24-hour period, going from 130 degrees down to 60. That's almost 90 degrees change. Okay. So the same thing happens on barren lands like this. When you're a microorganism trying to live in here and bring fertility back to these soils, it's really hard to do when soil temperatures fluctuate that much. The other one, it increases infiltration and reduces weeds and undesirable plants on the land. Okay. Really, when you're a rancher, bare ground is probably the biggest enemy of any rancher in New Mexico. If you've got a ranch that's 10,000 acres and 50% of those 10,000 acres is bare ground, it's like your ranch is only 5,000 acres. Okay. And as ranchers, we all pride ourselves on how many acres we manage. But if half of it's bare ground, it's really like your ranch is half the size that it really is. On the other hand, if your ranch is 50% cover and you increase it by 50%, and now you got 75% cover, it's like you bought a whole other ranch. It's like you bought 2,500 acres and it didn't cost you a dime. Okay. And so that's why I really emphasize cover on the land, because if you can maximize the cover on your land and the productivity, if you double the productivity on your ranch, it's like you doubled the size of your ranch, and you can also double the amount of livestock you run on the place. Okay. Very important. The last one, minimizing soil disturbance. This one's really important. In the cropland world, minimizing soil disturbance really refers to putting a plow in the ground, tillage, using herbicides, using chemicals, things like that. Okay. In the rangeland worlds, we don't till the land. We don't plow it. We don't hardly use any herbicides or chemicals, fertilizers, things like that. So minimizing soil disturbance in the rangeland world really means maximizing rest after a grazing event. Okay. So meaning we graze the land and we come off of it and we move on and we give it the most rest we can give it. Okay. In the grazing management world, we'll go over 3 different grazing management systems. We've got continuous grazing, a simple rotational grazing, and intensive rotational grazing. Okay. And we've got all these pros and cons in this slide of which one's better. And it really all depends on the producer and their objectives and what they can accomplish. Okay. I really like this picture down here. It's a pretty good diagram of what all 3 of these systems look like. On our ranch, we've gone through every single version of these grazing management systems, from continuous grazing to a simple rotation. And now with this virtual fencing, we're crossing over to this more intensive grazing that's right here on the far right corner. This next slide, this is the same version of that last diagram, but this is on our ranch. This is the little bit of deeded acres that my dad does own, about 1,800 acres. In 2020, he bought this place and he called me up and he said, I'm thinking about buying this place. Do you want to go look at it? I said, yeah, you bet. And so we went out and looked at it. The land was very degraded. It probably had about 40% cover. I walked through the land and I probably counted about 6 or 7 perennial grass species. But knowing what I know about range management, I could tell that the land had a lot of potential. I said, go for it. It's a good piece of land. It just needs a little bit of TLC. And so it was all one grazing unit when we bought it in 2020. And we ran a fence like that, east to west, and we cut the place in half and went on a simple grazing 2 pasture rotation. So now on that 4th principle, maximizing rest, we were grazing at 50% of the year and we were resting 50% of the year. And that made a really big difference on that place, even just a simple 2 pasture rotation. The very next year, my dad had a broken leg and because a horse fell on him. Okay. And he's got his crutches, and I tell him, let's go for a drive and let's go look at the land. And he grabbed his crutches and we went for a walk. And that day we counted 23 different perennial grasses on the place, just on a 2 pasture rotation. Okay. Where a year ago we counted 6 or 7. Okay. Big difference. And that's where he started to see the difference in what grazing management was doing for the land. And so that very next year, he tells me, well, what do you say we apply for EQIP and we shoot a fence north to south? I said, man, I thought you'd never ask. So we put in for EQIP. We got approved and got a fence put in here north to south. Now we had a 4 pasture rotation and we were using the place 25% of the year and resting at 75. And the land was getting better. It was getting healthier. We were getting more cover and more diversity on the land. And things were going good. Okay. The very next year, my brother comes over and he says, NMDA has this healthy soils grant. What do you say we put in for these virtual fencing? This virtual fencing was brand new, still is brand new. And he said, what do you say we put in for virtual fencing and see if we could keep on improving on this thing? He said, yeah, let's do it. So we talked to my dad, and to my surprise, he didn't really push back that hard because he had already seen what grazing management was doing for us and what it was doing for the land. And so we put in for virtual fencing collars through NMDA and then the Soil and Water Conservation District. And we proposed to split it up into 18 paddocks now. And now we were going to use it 5% of the year and rest at 95% of the year. Okay. And we did. We got funded. We got our collars. We got them put on. This is what virtual fencing is doing for us now. We went from 4 pastures like here over to, we started doing these rotational grazing, and we were doing 100-acre paddocks, and we were moving cattle probably about once a month. And then we got to here, and we still weren't getting the results we wanted. We wanted a little more hoof impact. When we got to here, about maybe 2 months ago, so why don't we make these paddocks even smaller? And so now we're here in this corner. These are the cows. Every orange dot is a cow, and it's got a collar on it. We're down to 25-acre paddocks, and we're moving cows every 7 to 8 days. and it's really making a big difference on the land. The cows are now competing for grass. They're now eating grasses that they didn't used to eat. They're eating plants that they didn't used to eat. Cattle are very competitive. They're like humans. If they're all in a mob, they say, "Well, if you're not going to eat it, I'll eat it," and they start eating things that they didn't used to eat. Okay, this is what it looks like on your computer screen when you're moving cows. Every one of these orange things is a dot. This is a paddock that they came out of, and they moved into here. You can see it's turning purple on this one. They've been in there for about a whole day, and as they're using the land, the app is tracking where they've been. And when we get uniform cover like we have over here, it tells us that maybe it's time to go take a look and see if it's time to move cows again. Okay, and so even on this one, we were getting pretty uniform cover, but you can still see some brown spots. That's why we made our paddocks even smaller, because we wanted even more uniform cover than that. And so this is what it looks like on your computer. Okay, this is a quick video I want to show you. This is the same ranch, the same one that had 40% cover and maybe 7 species of grasses. This was a month ago. We were gathering cows and weaning calves, and this is what the land looks like today. You can see the collars on those cows. Maybe you can see them. Now we have 70 to 80% cover out there on the land. Really amazing results. And this is another picture of another place over in Puerto de Luna. This is what we've been able to accomplish just with grazing management. We've been able to transform the lands from unproductive to productive. In less than 2 years, this change happened. Okay. Range monitoring is really important because you can't see the change when you're a rancher and you're out there every day. You can't see this change happen. So you have to take pictures and you got to look at them and put them side by side, because ranchers see their land so often that it's like trying to see your kids grow up. You can't really see the change until you put 2 pictures next to each other. And you really see that from kindergarten to first grade, this kid really changed a lot. Okay. The same happens on these out on New Mexico rangelands. That's why ranchers have a hard time seeing change on their land, because they see their land as often as they see their kids, And so range monitoring is really a handy tool, very important. It's been a deal maker. Ever since my dad's seen these pictures, he doesn't really push back on changing the way we do things. This has really been good for everybody to be able to monitor this change. Okay, so we'll go over virtual fencing real quick, how it works. Basically, it's a lot like electric fencing, only there's no physical fence. It's just a collar on a cow. And the collar is tracking the cow through GPS. And so you update your fence on your computer or on your cell phone. It talks to the internet. Then it talks to a base station or a cell tower, which then talks back to the cow. And that's how it works. Okay, really amazing stuff. And so you draw your grazing area where you want the cow, like you want it here. And you don't want her out here. And as she gets to this area, it starts to beep and it makes a noise. And then when she crosses that threshold, it gives her a zap, just like an electric fence would. And she turns around and says, "Oh no, I'm not going over there." And after a while, the cattle learn to listen to that sound. And so we're not constantly zapping cows. After a while, they learn to listen to that sound and they turn around when they hear the sound. Okay. And if they push the limit, then they get the zap. This is what the devices look like. This is a picture from a couple months ago. We had a virtual fencing workshop out on the ranch, and we had producers from all over came over to learn about it. These collars have solar panels on them, so they charge themselves. I'm impressed with them. When those cows get a drink, they submerge that thing completely in the water trough, and it still works somehow. So they're pretty good. This is a picture of when we were putting the cow collars on. Fairly easy. You can make this collar give you alerts when a cow hasn't moved for 5 or 6 hours. It'll send you a text message, say, "Hey, you might want to go take a look. Something's not right." You can on your app, it'll tell you which cow it is and where she's at. It's really pretty handy. You got to train the animals. Like I said, training the animals was a lot easier than I thought. When I read about it, they'll have you believe it's complicated. It really wasn't that complicated for us. We put them in a small paddock. It was probably a 17-acre paddock, and we drew the virtual fence boundary about 10 feet off of the true fence and left them there for 7 days. And they tested the limits and learned very fast. After 7 days, we were turning cows out and starting our virtual fencing grazing management program. This is what the apps look like. There's several versions of it, several companies. The one right here in the middle is the one we're using. This is our place. And these are other companies. Really handy. Right now, there's there's 4 different companies selling virtual fencing collars. And all of them have their pros and cons. If you guys are interested, I recommend you snap a picture of this slide right here. I'll give you a little time to pull out your phone, and this will give you an idea of how each company works. And this slide is about a year old. These costs may have changed since then. But if you want, snap a quick picture of that, and you'll get an idea of all the different companies and what they have to offer. NRCS is now cost sharing on virtual fencing. As of October 1st of this last year, they started cost sharing on this. And the way it works is they'll do a 5-year contract with you, a grazing management contract. The first year they contract fence, which it's kind of funny because it's not really a fence at all. But they contract a fence and they pay you $109.89 per collar. And for the following 4 years, they pay you for grazing management, $70 a head for the next 2 to 5 years. Okay, years 2 through 5. When it's all said and done, you'll get enough money to pay for all these collars. This is kind of broken. I'm working on fixing this because the virtual fence companies want all their money up front. So this is a little bit problematic for us, but we're working on getting a better version of this for our producers. Right now, this is what we got. When it's all said and done, you get about $391 per collar. Okay, the collars costed about $300 delivered to the door for us. Okay, so most of the cost, or all the cost, if you play your cards right, will be covered through NRCS funding. For those of you who may want to learn more about virtual fencing, there's another workshop going on in Clovis next Tuesday, December 9th. If you're interested, snap a picture of this slide right here. You can go to this QR code and you can sign up, and it's free, and they will feed you lunch. So it's worth your while to go just for the lunch. Okay, so snap you a picture of that if you're interested in that, and get registered with that QR code. So I'll move on to another thing that we're doing on the ranch. We've adopted these what they call telemetry. That's a fancy word for a water sensor that goes in your storage tank that tells you how much water's in the tank. A lot of our ranchers' day consists of checking waters and making sure your cattle have enough water to drink. Okay, because we run cattle in 3 different counties and we're scattered land and cattle, like I mentioned earlier. My dad spends a lot of time on the road just checking waters. So we looked into one of these sensors and we bought this one, put it on the farthest storage tank he has to check. It's 120 miles round trip just to check the water in this tank for him. So we bought this sensor, put it in. The sensor paid for itself within a year. Okay. After putting this on one of our storage tanks, I started thinking, man, why isn't NRCS cost sharing on this? This is saving time, money, and energy for the American rancher. And so I started pushing on it and talking to the right people here at NRCS. And as of October 1st last year, NRCS started cost sharing on these water sensors also, which is really handy when you can just get up in the morning, open up an app, and see the water level on all your tanks. Okay. Some people think, wow, ranchers probably just sit on their butt after that. What are they going to do? There's plenty to do on the ranch. So it's just one less thing you got to do. The nice part about this one is that you can set all these alerts on your phone. When this tank gets down to 50%, it sends you an alert. Said, hey, 50%, you might want to take a look. When it gets down to 10%, it'll send you an alert, a text message saying, hey, something's going on in this tank. You might want to go take a look. Okay. So if you know your lands are healthy and you got enough grass and you know your water is good, it saves you a lot of energy when you're trying to ranch out in New Mexico. And the hardest thing these days is finding good, reliable help on the ranch. So this is really helping ranchers quite a bit. Okay. So these are two brand new things that NRCS in New Mexico is cost sharing on, and not just New Mexico, but nationwide. NRCS is cost sharing on these two practices here. This is a whole bunch of different versions of this telemetry. These sensors, there's lots of different companies. I don't advocate for anyone in particular. Do your research, figure out which one works for you, and apply for funding through NRCS. Okay. NRCS also has a new enhancement for the conservation stewardship program, where the cost share for these sensors on your storage tanks and your water troughs. You can also do it through the EQIP program. So we can do it now through EQIP and through the CSP program. Okay. That's all I got for you now, but I'm going to show you a quick video so you can get an idea of how this collars work. Okay. The virtual fence is right here on this line, right on this trail. From here on, they're not supposed to be, and you can see this thing will start to buzz.
How often do you have to change batteries?
They say every 10 years, but I don't know. Let me hold up there. Okay, so from this cow trail to the left is virtual fencing. The cattle are supposed to be on the right, and they're not supposed to be on the left. If you listen, you turn up your volume, you can hear the buzzing. The beeping sound, and you'll see that cow turn around. And then you'll also see her test the limits, and she'll get zapped, and she'll go back to where she belongs.
How often do you have to change batteries?
They say every 10 years, but I don't know. We're on 8 months, so it's supposed to be 10 years.
They've stayed charged up
so far. This cow pushes the limit right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as they hear that, when you rewind, watch this cow.
Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as they hear that beep, they change their mind. No, that one got zapped. Yeah. Too close. Ahora sí les puede echar. Okay, and with that, that's all I have for you guys today. You guys have questions? I'll take questions.
Thanks, Jim. A few have come up in the chat, and Jim Thorpe has popped a couple in the Q&A. So folks, feel free to ask your questions for Jim. The first one I've got here is from Carissa, and she is asking, what is the name of the app you put on your phone that's used for virtual fencing and monitoring grazing areas?
Okay, all right. There are several versions. In that one slide that I told you to take a picture of, I'm going to share screen again. That'll be easier. Okay. But there are several versions of it. And let me find. Okay, these are all the 4 different companies. So every one of these companies has their own app. Okay. We're currently using Gallagher, but there's a company called Halter, No Fence, and Vents. Okay. Hopefully that one answers your question.
So assuming they all have their own proprietary app.
Correct.
Yes, yes. Our speaker last time, Santiago Tsumi, he's built an app as well for no fence collars. So he uses the collars, but it's his app, in case folks were wondering from last time. There's a question here from Enrique, and I think this was like in real time. He was asking GPS collars or towers, but I think this was referring to the funding. So does the funding you can get from NRCS, does that pay for the towers or the collars, or is it paying for both of them?
Okay, you get a price per head, and with that, you cover your costs however you see fit. The funding is not tied to a collar or a tower, it's just tied to a price per cow. Okay, so if you can afford to pay for it all through the funding you get it that way. Having said that, some companies require a tower and others don't. The company we're using, we don't have a tower because we have good cell service on the entire ranch. Now, if you don't have good cell service on the ranch, then you'll need a tower that acts like a repeater. So you set that tower on a place that does have cell service. And so the collar talks to the tower and the tower talks to another cell tower and back to the internet, right? And so the towers act like a repeater if you need it. There are other companies that you've got to have a tower, no matter whether you've got good cell service or not.
That makes sense. Thanks, Jim. Samantha Yazzie asks, how much do the collars weigh?
They're the ones we've got are kind of heavy. They're probably like an old canteen, an old cowboy canteen that you'd carry on your horse. They kind of look like one. I'm not really worried about it. I get that question a lot, but we forget that we used to hitch these animals to a yoke and plow the fields with them. So if they can plow a field, they can carry that collar regardless of how heavy it is. But you do got to be careful the way you put them on, because if you don't put it on and it swings too much, it starts to make a callus on their neck and stuff. So collar placement is important, and there's a lot of videos on how to do it when the time comes.
There's a great follow-up question for this from Casey Schooley, and they ask, have you ever had a collar get caught in a fence or any other object?
We have the collars are built to come off. They break if they get caught on something, and if they pull hard enough, it breaks, and you can put it right back on. We've never had one break. They've just slipped it off their head. The nice part is that it's got a GPS tracker. You take your app and you can walk right up to the collar and you find it laying on the ground. We've had one caught on a branch, and we had one caught on a hay feeder that was laying out in the middle of the ranch. Yeah, it can be a problem, but it's not that big of a problem.
Thanks. There is a different question here from Sarah Noel, and she's mentioning the difference in the climate between 2022 and 2020, when 2020 was dry and 2022 was much wetter. So how did you account for that when interpreting the vegetation differences between those years?
Okay. There's a whole story on those pictures. I could go on for days, and actually I have a whole other YouTube video on those pictures alone, and it's called range monitoring for small ranchers. You can go on YouTube and hear the story of that, but in a nutshell, we were very dry in 22. Okay. That picture's from March of 22. And so I have to explain this a lot, because you get a lot of non-believers that say, oh, that was just a really good year of rain. You got lucky. Okay. But the problem with that is that when it rains, it doesn't rain grass. Okay. It has to rain on grass. Okay. And so that picture was before the growing season even started. Okay. So that was what we grew in 2021. And in 2021, we grew all that vegetation really. And in March of 22, the growing season hadn't even started. And so later on that year, we did get a decent year of rain there. At the same time, when I took that picture, ranchers all around us were selling cattle because they were out of grass. And I told my dad, I said, look, all these guys are selling cattle, they're out of grass, but you got 5 pastures you hadn't even touched yet. And in those days, he really wasn't a believer in this grazing management. He'd been doing it, but he'd kind of been coerced into it, we could say, by myself and my brother. Okay. And that's when I took those 2 pictures and I put them side by side. And that evening, I showed him those pictures. I said, here you go. Tell me again about how this grazing management doesn't work. And when he saw those pictures, that's when he was really a believer. He said, wow, I can't believe my place has changed that much. And that's why I tell you this range monitoring is important, because ranchers see their land every day and they don't see the change, whether it's good change or bad. And so, yeah, that's what I got.
Thanks, Jim. There's quite a few questions coming in. Another question from Samantha here. What is the range for the specific virtual fencing that you use?
Range? I don't know what range.
I guess that would mean like where you're using it.
Oh, okay.
How far can you go from your location? I'm
Um,
assuming if it's
okay.
cell service, it's as far as you can sell.
Yeah, as long as you got cell service for us, if you've got these towers, depending on topography, I've heard anything from 6 to 7 miles. We don't use towers, so I couldn't tell you for sure. We're lucky we've got cell service.
Question here about the water monitors. How well do they work with freezing temperatures?
They work pretty good. We haven't had any problems with it. They're pretty stout.
I've seen a comment here from Lara, who works with Santiago, and she's corrected me. Santiago's app doesn't work with virtual fencing collars, just with the GPS tracking collars. And so thanks for the correction, Lara. So we have GPS tracking collars that transmit to Santiago's app. The virtual fencing companies are very careful about protecting their proprietary data. So that's something to bear in mind if you're thinking about going that route. We had this question last time and I couldn't answer it. But can you use virtual fencing with bison?
Bison, wow, I don't know. I mean, maybe it'd have to be a heck of a zap, I guess. I don't know.
I would imagine they're a bit stubborn.
They're creatures of habit. I bet if you train them, it'll take some work, I bet.
It's very true. Okay, one and different tack again. Daryl Yazi asks, did you do any reseeding of the grass or did it come back naturally?
It all came back naturally. And so on rangelands, you would be amazed how much seeds are in the soil. Okay. Our first instinct in range management is to go and put seed back on the land. That's because we're thinking like farmers. Okay. In the farming world, you put diversity back on the land pretty easy. Take a no-till drill and a multi-species cover crop, and bam, there you have it. Okay. In rangelands, what we're missing are the right conditions for seed to germinate. So when those Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon pictures, those before and afters, that's what I was referring to. I knew there was plenty of seed in those soils. We just needed to create the conditions, and we created the conditions with an annual. We used rye and winter wheat in that high country in Mora. And as soon as we got cover on the land, Mother Nature started to do her thing, and all those native grasses started to germinate. So yeah, no seeding was done. It's just all natural, you could say. Oh, I don't have sound.
No, that was me. I was muted. We got lots of questions coming in, so I just wanted to let people who are on the line with us to know that we're going to pass the hour as we go through these questions. So what is the status of using collars on bulls? And that's from Casey.
Collars on bulls. We're not using collars on bulls. The companies say you can use collars on bulls. We've chosen not to because it's just more collars we got to buy and they're not cheap. It's like buying a cell phone for every one of your cows. Okay. And so, but by not using the collars on the bulls have free access to all the best vegetation. And it's really a win-win for us because those bulls have a lot of work to do. We expect a lot out of them. We expect them to breed at least 20 cows per season within a matter of 50 days. And so when they've got access to all the best grasses, it's really good. The other thing, we don't collar the calves when they're born, and they've got free range to everything ahead of the cow to get all the best grasses out there and really put pounds on your calves too. But it can be done. We're just not doing it.
Enrique adds that Vence says that collars are harder to keep on the bull's thick neck, which is a very good point.
Bulls are destructive creatures. They're hard.
So Jackie asks, are you handling the cows more than in the past with the collar? Oh, are you handling the cows more than in the past? with the sorry, the cow, the thing keeps moving, with the collar.
Right, with the collar, sure. No, not really. Not any more than we did before. We handle cattle probably twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. That's another reason we went with the Gallagher version because it had the solar panel on it, and that meant we didn't have to change batteries. To me, we're doing virtual fencing to be hands off. And so if I've got to change batteries and I got to gather cows again, it kind of, to me, it defeats the purpose of why we do it. So we chose to go with the one that had a solar charger on it. Every now and then the collar does come off and you do got to gather that cow and put it back on. That doesn't happen that often. And sometimes we just leave her out there and she does her thing. And when we gather cows, we'll put it on. Sometimes it's not worth our while to spend the time to go gather that one cow. It all depends on the producer.
Thanks, Jim. So I'm going to switch from the chat to the Q&A now, and here's a couple from Jim Thorpe. Jim asks, do you see any future applications for artificial intelligence in range and ranch management?
I do, and I don't know if I like it yet. Call me old-fashioned, but I'm a man of the land. I just getting out on the land, seeing it with your own eyes, touching it, all that. But we're seeing the change happen really fast, just with the stuff we went over now. And we got to keep up with the times. Times are changing and we've got to adapt, and the world's spinning faster. And if you don't keep up, you get left behind, and we're trying not to get left behind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Jim Thorpe again with a different question. Are there any water tank bubblers or de-icers for dealing with frozen water tanks in remote pastures? So I guess something like that you can actually tell it to switch on remotely instead of having to go out there.
I see. Not that I know of, but man, ranchers and farmers are innovative people. I bet you could invent one with a thermostat of some sort, you know. But no, not that I know of. I'll talk to Jim one of these days. And I designed one on a grazing allotment when I worked for BLM that was a winter allotment, and it was frost free and it worked out good. I should patent the thing, and I never have. But there's things you could do.
Another question, are these suitable for weaning, the fencing collars?
Weaning calves. I suppose they are. We haven't tried it, but I imagine they are. They probably work good on yearlings. I don't know if you're referring to just weaning calves to just split a pasture in half and keep the calves in one side. And maybe it seems like a very expensive investment to wean calves. To buy collars just to wean calves seems a little expensive. A good fence line weaning program would probably be a lot cheaper to me, but it might work. We haven't tried it.
George asks, have you had any issues with cows running through the virtual fence boundaries and getting stuck on the far side in the zap zone?
See, good question. Okay. Yes, there will be cows that don't respect it. There will be cows that'll test it and they say, you know what, the grass is still green on the other side, and I don't care about that zap. But the beauty of it is that once that cow crosses the threshold, the zap zone, we're going to call it, then that collar stops zapping that cow, and she's not getting constantly zapped for weeks. Okay, that collar just turns off, and that cow is doing whatever she does from now on with the collar turned off. The other beauty of it is when she crosses back into the virtual fencing, that collar automatically turns back on and it goes back to zapping. Amazing technology. So yeah, don't worry about zapping your cow constantly if she doesn't listen. Okay, it'll just turn off.
That's good.
There will be cows. Yeah, there'll be cows that don't fit your program, and you just got to figure out what to do with them. But yeah, it's a thing.
I've got a couple of questions on predators. So George asks, a follow-up here is with evading predators. Do you have any experience or ideas on how virtual fencing collars might interact positively or negatively with pressure from wolves or bears that the cattle are trying to evade?
I don't. But back to Jim Thorpe's question earlier, it's only a matter of time. before somebody will come up with something. But as far as I know right now, it's not a thing.
So kind of related to that, Trender had asked, the collars alert about lack of movement, right? So what about excessive movement in the example, say with a predator chasing cattle?
I've not messed with the app to get it to tell me that. It might do it. I don't think it does, but I bet if you mess with it, it might do it. I just hadn't gone that far. I suspect you're in wolf country and we're not, so we haven't worried about those things.
I see here, I'm bouncing back and forth between questions, but someone asks here, have you had any issues with the collars getting hot and burning the cattle?
No, we haven't. At least not that I'm aware of. I've not seen that.
I guess one thing could be if they shorted, rather than be getting hot from the weather, as if there was a short, but hopefully the companies have that covered.
I suspect they do. They're pretty good at what they do.
They have to be. They're in fierce competition now. It's
They
crazy.
really are. They really are.
Sebastian asks here, hi Jim, great presentation. With the Gallagher system, can you take down and put up fences in real time from your phone while you're moving them? Or moving the cattle, I'm assuming here, or do you need to do that from home before and after moving them?
Good question. Good question. On the app, you can't take it down and put it up a new fence, but if you create your next paddock, if you could create 10 paddocks ahead of you on the computer, then on your phone, you can turn on the next paddock or turn it off. But you can't make new or change the design of it while you're out there in the field on your phone. So there's certain things that you can do on the phone and others that you can only do on the computer. And so, yeah, great question.
There's some great questions coming in, and we've still got a few more. And folks, if you're still on, if you wouldn't mind replying to the webinar and assessment and feedback questions, there's only 3 of them, but we need to prove that we're doing a good job to our bosses. So yeah, if you can interact with the little poll, that would be awesome. So Sebastian has a second question here. He asks, is there a way to quickly shut off an individual collar from the app if it's malfunctioning for some reason?
Yes, that you can do.
Yeah.
For example, if you got a cow that you got to gather and she's in the herd and you got to get that one cow and bring her to the headquarters, you can just turn that individual cow off. It does take about a half hour for all of it to happen. It's not instant. And so you can't just go find the cow and turn it off on your phone and expect to drive her back to the house. You got to give it a little time. About a half hour is what it takes.
Yeah, he mentions here that someone he knows had a bad experience with a collar being stuck in shock mode on a cow.
Huh.
And I guess that cow had to suffer for a bit before they got that fixed. Okay, Tana asks, is there anything in the works to monitor forage intake and water intake or rate of gain data using the collars? So I guess we're going into a bit more of a asking for a bit more data here. Can the collar help us monitor forage and water intake?
As far as I know, the answer is no on that one. I know that there are ear tags out there that do that. There's one called Ceres, I believe, CERES. I just read all about it yesterday. That'll track a whole bunch of data, little small tag with a solar charger on it. But these collars are not doing that. I suspect in the future they probably will. As competitive as this market is, they've got to stand out and be better than the next guy. So it's only a matter of time. This is all new stuff. It's only a matter of time before all these things start to happen, and even the price has to eventually go down on these things as competition increases.
That's right. I mean, like you say, the competition's there. I know with some of the data, you can figure out whether they're walking or grazing or traveling, etc. And you can also see whether or not they're visiting water sites, whether or not they're drinking. So you can infer some of this from that. But yeah, and to actually get the forage intake or water intake or rate of gain, that would be amazing.
And the feedlots are already doing that, and as far as I know, that tag already doing it on rangelands also. So you might look into that if you're interested in that. I believe it's called CERES, and it's spelled Sears or series, something along. I don't know how to pronounce it, but take a look.
I popped it in the chat. Maybe
There you go.
Helena, if you can Google, see if you can find it, or Susan. Blaine Sanchez, what was your original stocking rate? What is it now? And what might its potential maximum be? And how would you determine reducing numbers?
Okay. So we started with 40 collars that we got through that Healthy Soils grant. And we tried it on all our first calf heifers. That place had a carrying capacity of about 40 head of cattle with a conventional rotational grazing. Now, with this intensive grazing that we're doing, we're adding 60 head to that herd, and we're now going to add 20 more head. So we're increasing it by what, 50%? Okay. And I suspect that it can run 80 more cows. We just don't have 80 first calf heifers this year to put on there. But now through NRCS, we also got 100 more collars, and through our Soil and Water Conservation District, we're getting another 140 collars. And eventually, within the next couple months, we're going to collar the rest of the herd. So right now we were in a trial run with those first calf heifers and those 40 collars. That all depends on you as a producer and how intensive you want to get with your management. I suspect that we can double the capacity of that place. We haven't got there yet, but we're already increasing it by 50%. I'm sure we could increase it by 100%. Just hadn't got there, but it can be done.
That's pretty impressive. That is very impressive.
And so to buy land to graze cattle, very expensive. To change the management and double the carrying capacity of your ranch just with grazing management doesn't cost that much. Okay. And so if you compare, let's say I bought 40 more collars to double the capacity of that place, it might sound expensive at $300 a collar, but it's like I bought a ranch that runs 40 more cows. Okay. So compare the cost of 40 collars to buying another ranch that runs 40 more cows. That's like, I don't know, $800,000 to $1 million right now. Okay. And so if you look at it that way, it's really not that expensive in the grand scheme of things. Okay. So that's the way I see it. Okay. If I can double the capacity, it's like I bought a whole other ranch that can run that many cows. Okay. That's all I have.
I think we're getting to the end of the questions now, just a few left, and lots of people saying thank you. Anonymous attendee says, random, but any issues with bruising from collars on cattle as they are processed?
No. I mean, not that I could tell anyway. But like I said, if you put that collar on too loose, it dangles and it moves a lot on the neck, and it rubs callus on the neck eventually. That happened to us because they were first calf heifers, and we had to put them on loose, expecting that cow to grow after a while. Some of them we put them on a little too loose, and they built a little callus there, and then we adjusted them when they finally grew to their mature age. And so if you're using them on yearlings, you've got to account for that the fact that cow's not done growing and that neck's still going to get wider and wider. So they're all little things to consider when you're putting on your collars.
Landon asks, will the Gallagher collars shift cows to the next paddock like halter?
Not automatically. You still got to do it yourself. That's pretty handy that a halter does that. I'm sure in the future, Gallagher will catch on and say, hey, we better keep up with the times. But right now, no.
Just a couple of comments that I've noticed come up. Corey, who was presenting for us last time, he said his family had success with bison on high tensile single strand electric fence, probably due to them touching their noses on the wire. he assumes they would respect the zap if they could feel it. So I guess that might be down to the design of the collar there. So maybe there is a chance with bison with virtual fencing. Chantal asks, do you run any other animals in conjunction with your collared cows in a grazing management plan?
No, not right now. My brother runs sheep on a whole other grazing operation, but we keep the cattle and sheep separate. We probably should add some more diversity of species into the mix. And I said that's that fifth principle that speeds up everything. When you add sheep, cows, goats, and a donkey, for example, throw a pig in there while you're at it, why not? And you really start to speed up the healing process of the lands, because you got more biology. When they poop, they're pooping microbes right back into the soil, and each animal's eating different things and cycling different nutrients. So we're not there yet, maybe someday.
Quick question. What was it? Are your herd primarily Angus and Black Baldy? That's from Casey.
Yes, we do have some Corrientes in the mix. We've got one pasture that's kind of rough country, and we've got some Corrientes in there, but we've been crossing them with Angus, and now they're half breeds, and eventually everything's turning black. And as of a couple of years ago, we started adding Hereford bulls, and we're getting Black Baldies in the mix too. And so, but yeah, right now we're with mostly black cows, Angus and Baldies.
Casey adds, the reason why they're asking is because they're wondering about how the docility of the different breeds reacts to the collars.
Great question. I can't speak to docility to the collars, but I do know as soon as we got Black Baldies, they were not as gentle as the black ones. Okay. As soon as you add a little hybrid vigor, you add vigor into everything, including temperament. One thing that I did notice, the herd instinct has kicked in on those cows. They want to be in a herd now. They want to be in a mob. And on those first calf heifers, for example, I had one that didn't calve. And so we've got this meat company. She didn't calve, so we turn our problems into money. Okay. So it's okay. Well, I'll turn her into steaks and burgers. And so my wife and my little boy and I went and horseback and gathered the cows, and we brought them all back to the ranch, every one of them. And we took the collar off of her, put it on another, and drove the rest of them back and left her in the pen. And she wasn't angry. She wasn't hot. She jumped 3 fences and caught up to us as we were getting to the other end of the ranch and putting cows back to their paddock. Okay. That cow had to be with the herd. And so she jumped 3 fences. And I thought, man, this is wild. This cow wasn't even, and I'm talking, she jumped out of the corral. And thought, wow, that cow really feels like she's got to be with the herd. And so I've noticed that it's kicked in the herd instinct on these animals. As I was saying, now they're also eating things they didn't used to eat. So they're getting competitive and all these things that come, things we didn't notice before, and maybe we're paying attention more also.
It's a really good opportunity for learning behaviors when you've got like all this data coming back. And
it's been great.
So let's see, there was one here. Daryl Yazi, are you doing any other erosion control measures on the rangeland?
Yeah, we've put in quite a bit of erosion control structures on old roads that we're not using anymore. Just putting cover back on the land really helps erosion quite a bit. Those are the 2 real big ones that we're using.
I think we may be at the end. There's some wonderful comments in the chat saying thank you, and people really appreciating what you've been sharing, and especially with this Q&A, quite a forest of questions there. So awesome for handling all of those, Jim. And if I've missed anybody's questions, please feel free to email Paige, Helena, and myself, and we'll pass them on to Jim. 2 more messages, I think. off topic, Casey again. Do you have any recommendations for eradicating love grass?
Oh man, love grass is hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. Nothing right off the top of my head, but that's a hard one.
Yes, it is
Love grass is tough.
a wicked problem, that's for sure. So Jim, I shared your slide again. They were asking, someone asked in the Q&A to have the slide up again for the curry meeting. So if we just share that while we say goodbye.
Oh yeah, sure. Give me a
For
sec.
folks who can access the chat, I did share the wrong slide. I shared a file called screenshot, but there's another one right under that called December 9th virtual fencing meeting. And that's a screenshot of this slide.